The history of art is the history of representation, developing closer and closer to what reality looks like. In the Paleolithic era, we painted the walls of caves with drawings of animals and the imprints of our hands. In the light thrown by fires in the cave, it would have seemed as if the paintings were moving. From Giotto and Vermeer, painting continued to improve in quality until achieving something that looked real. The way we represent reality, this simulation, seems an integral part of human culture. It's not to say art's only there to represent the real world, but it's a big, we're interested in it, we're obsessed with it. So where is all this leading to? If we are continuing to get better and better at simulating reality, it would be a decent guess that one day we'll create something that is an exact copy of reality. A full simulation of everything. A perfect simulation. Now, I know this topic of conversation can sometimes be seen as a bit abstract and something only people on drugs talk about, but I feel people can sometimes be a bit dismissive about these sorts of conversations. Questions about the nature of reality, life and death, it's good to talk about. Hopefully, it'll give you a little thing to think about and wonder, am I real? So, let's see. The main issue with representing reality is detail. Anyone can put a texture of Earth on a 3D sphere, but that's quite a basic way of simulating the world. There's no dimensionality, a mountain's the same height as the ocean. No weather, forests, buildings, animals, or people. It's actually bad. We can see much better representation of reality in video games. The aspect of realism has always been interesting to game developers, with some of the earliest games representing the real world in some way. Of course, most of these places are fictional, but the degree of realism that's in the game has improved over the years. Some games have big worlds in them, and others are a lot smaller. With smaller areas you can have more detail, while bigger isn't always better. It can be a bit empty sometimes, But in this ideal simulation that I'm talking about in this video, we would have both. The whole world and everything in it, from the biggest mountain to the smallest stone. And it would all react, trees would blow in the wind, seasons would change, and every person would be represented by a double that exists within this perfect simulation. But say that this did exist. What would we, the creators of it, do with it? Well, one could act as an observer, exploring faraway places that you'll be able to visit easily. Or instead of watching a nature documentary, you could watch a simulation of nature. Though rather than relying on static cameras and stuff, you could fly amongst herds of animals or alongside flocks of birds. Rather than watching dramas, you could just follow people around and be a bit nosy, listening in on conversations or watching people clean themselves in strange ways that they do when they're alone. You could also modify things within the simulation. What if there wasn't any gravity, for instance? What would that look like? Or what if there were insects the size of dogs, for instance? If the underlying model of the simulation was based on the laws of nature, it stands to reason you could create or alter things that would then be simulated as if it was really happening. This would mean you could create any sort of experience within this world, or make horrible mutant monsters and things like that. Whatever you want. You could also exist within this simulation, playing it like a game. You could take over somebody's body and live in their shoes, like the show Quantum Leap. Or maybe just insert yourself into the simulation with resources and abilities that would equal that of a superhero, like flying around and zapping people with lasers. Basically, this perfect simulation of Earth would allow anybody to be a god. Omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient. But making something like this would be a bit tricky. The main issue is the technology doesn't exist yet, which is a biggie. We can't accurately simulate one person, let alone 8 billion at the same time. And the real world is full of imperfections and little bits, the way light bounces between objects, as well as everything changing over time constantly. it's very complicated reality. And although I can't do this yet, I don't think this will never happen. You remember thinking to yourself,
oh, this will never happen. They'll never make a real simulation of the world. It's really complicated.
But look here, computer graphics have come a long way since their first inception, improving much quicker in representing reality than the camera or the paintbrush. It may not happen this decade, but this sort of technology could exist in our lives. The most realistic simulation of the world right now, and in this video, is Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's a recreation of the world using satellite photography, artificial intelligences, all that kind of thing. And some areas are better represented than others, places like New York being scanned in 3D, while other places are a bit more vague, made up. It does recreate weather based on live weather information, as well as creating things like rivers and forests and cars on the road. There's very few animals in this simulation of Earth, and there's no people. It doesn't go to this level of detail as usually you're flying around thousands of miles in the air, but you can imagine it would be possible to have people walking around in this simulation of Earth. And that's all they might do, but it's a good enough starting point to what would eventually lead to be a perfect simulation of Earth. You see, we're starting here and we've got to go there. We're starting here and we've got to go there. When I say the perfect simulation, I mean an exact copy of the planet and everything in it. It wouldn't just look like a game or even a film. It would be as real as everything happening around the screen that you're watching this on right now. To get to this stage would require a lot of thinking about, for instance, simulating water. Not only would you need to accurately recreate the way water splashes in pools, but the way water is gathered in clouds, rain down and becomes part of the ocean. And on top of that, having every other system in this world reacting to it at the same time, whilst also being influenced by it. It's complicated. That's why I think it will take a bit of time to get to this perfect simulation. There's some shortcuts we could do though, like you don't need to require every recreation of everything at a high level of detail all the time. When you're playing a game, it only renders what the player can see, rather than the whole game at the same time. And if this simulation was to go at, say, an atomic level of detail, well, you'd only really need to simulate atoms and little things if someone was looking at them, for instance. There's also the question of how to simulate everything if we don't know that much. There's a lot of places in the world we've never been, like the bottom of the sea, or all these little islands dotted around. And it's complicated, it's big, it's always changing. How would you know what people were doing or how they'd act? It's not as if we have some huge set of data that's been tracking billions of people for years, or like to continue updating the simulation. It would require everyone on the planet to go around this like a little computer that can record audio and video. It'll never take off. Which brings me to one of the main issues of a full simulation of the world would be you wouldn't know for certain if you were real or not. Although that's possible right now, the odds of that actually being true change once we've created a copy of the planet and everybody in it. The simulation would be so accurate, it would be indistinguishable from the real thing. But just as it's indistinguishable from the real thing, it's just as real. There seems to be some anguish about the idea of being simulated inside a computer rather than existing in real life. But there's no inherent value in either plane of existence. Being real isn't necessarily better than not being real, as there's no way to tell them apart. What I'm saying is, being real matters as much as it does being made up. They matter equally. Neither of them matter. Although one of the advantages of being digital is the concept of death. If the simulation of a person died, there's the opportunity for an afterlife. Their minds could shift from the simulated Earth and appear in a simulated heaven. In one version of reality, You could be reunited with your loved ones and exist on an infinite plane of beauty, happiness, and all that other stuff in the afterlife. I don't know, have you read the Bible recently? Hello? I mean, it's the least we could do, really. Like, if we're going to go to the effort of simulating a person's mind and emotions, all the bad experiences and pain they go through, why not send them to video game heaven afterwards? There's a question of ethics in creating this perfect simulation. If we were to intervene in the simulation at all, as if we were playing a game, we'd expect realistic responses from people. They would think and feel and make decisions. But then if that was the case, why do you also want to subject them to the strange fantasies people have? On the one hand, making a perfect copy of everyone on the planet probably shouldn't be done, due to the potential to create a sort of never-ending hellscape of the entire population of Earth, and a good chance a version of yourself will need to experience this. On the other hand, dude, it's just a video game. We can imagine such technology will have an effect on reality itself. People already blown away by the internet, with social media doing a number on the collective psyche. From fake news and conspiracy theories to the slow erosion of attention spans and empathy, the internet has done less for giving everyone access to knowledge, and more to sow discontent between people globally. Turns out just sending messages to strangers all the time is bad for you. And not just for you, for everybody. With this technology, we could guess it'll worm its way into people's heads a little bit. But if this is happening inside a simulation, am I real? What is consciousness? Do we have free will? What is real? And with the simulation recreating reality, this will also happen in the simulation. This nervousness about what is real and what isn't. Except from the outside looking in, we could see that them questioning reality is more meaningful because it's true. The only way a simulated person could escape their reality is if they were uploaded into like a sort of robot body or something in our world. But personally, I'd be happy just being in the simulated world as a simulated person. Has there won't really be any difference? Why would you? Why would you go up or go down? Just be happy with your lot. When all is said and done, how real is reality anyway? On one level, we can only experience the world through our human perceptions, which aren't that good. Every object isn't really have any colour or anything. It's just what our eyes see, which is wrong. As well as the limits of our human perception, there's also massive impact culture has on the way we experience world. From language to memory, the way we perceive ourselves or other groups of people, what we call reality is just a collection of ideas that can be rearranged with chemicals or high doses of propaganda. A media landscape designed to get people angry for advertising revenue, a government system that does no governing, meat-free burgers, artificial sweetener, deep fake videos, parasocial relationships. We've gone from smoking cigarettes to inhaling watermelon water vapour laced with nicotine. We can all feel the world is just not quite right, and so we value authenticity. I would say there isn't really any authenticity. But what is authentic anyway? We just don't know.